When people say they hate classical singing, they're usually talking about exactly one genre: opera. You can't see that. And I get it, opera is loud and dramatic, and it has done an excellent job cornering like the entire classical singing brand. But classical vocal music goes back hundreds of years, like way before opera ever existed. And today I put together a rapid fire guide of 24 styles of classical singing. Because opera is just one single slice of a very large, very delicious pie. And listen, if somewhere along the way you start thinking like, maybe opera's not quite as bad as I thought it was, maybe that was the point. This video's a slippery slope. There is a Baroque agenda. And before you know it, you're Googling opera tickets at 1 a.m. like a totally reasonable person. Hi, I'm Cait. I'm an opera singer, and here are 24 styles of classical singing. I'm realizing now that I probably should have framed this differently, because starting with alphabetical lists means numbers at the top, which is like in opera and art world the weirdest stuff, and also opera is first on the list. I'm sorry, I have no control over this. 20th and 21st century opera. This is also known as modern opera sometimes. It's basically what happens when composers innovate. Innovate, make things really hard to listen to. Potato, potato. You're gonna have a tonality here, we'll have unconventional vocal techniques, we're gonna have genre blending with jazz and musical theater, and brace yourselves, opera's in English. Ooh-wee. I mean, like, besides the really old ones, but like they're in a corner over there. Don't look over there. You might also start seeing some modern concepts on stage for once. We'll have real world politics, contemporary wars, you know, people with smartphones, that kind of stuff. This category is going to include stuff like Porgy and Bess, Turn of the Screw, Candide, Akhenaten. How do you pronounce that? But for our example, we're going to go full modernist, because the point here is not pretty, right? The point is experimentation. And if you are waiting for a nice tune to grab onto, you're going to be waiting a while. Moving swiftly along from that, a little bit of a palate cleanser here. 20th century English and American song. Now, when classical singers say song, we don't mean like any song the way that we colloquially use the word now. We specifically mean art song. These are going to be short little poems that have been set to music, and they were written for recitals. So not opera, not church, like piano, singer, and feelings in a very small room back before people had smartphones and TikTok and stuff, okay? Compared to opera, art song is a lot more intimate. You're not trying to be heard over an orchestra in like a 3,000 seat hall. You're gonna be in a smaller room. And then for 20th century English and American art song specifically, it's still gonna be experimenting harmonically, just like we saw in the opera world, but it's gonna be a lot more grounded than we see in the modern opera. Names you might hear in this category would be Samuel Barber, Amy Beach, Ruth Crawford Seeger, and Gerald Finzi. And for this example, I have chosen Finzi's The Clock of the Years because it lives rent-free in my head from this performance by a former classmate of mine at the Royal College of Music. Oh my God, I'm obsessed with this intro. It's so damn dramatic. Okay, let's go.
A spirit passed before my face. The hair of my flesh stood up. And the spirit said, I can make the clock of the years go backward, but am loath to stop it where you will. And I cried, agree to that, proceed.
Avant-garde. Okay, prepare yourselves. This is the weirdest corner of the room. It's only uphill from here, I promise. Avant-garde classical vocal music, just like every type of avant-garde art, exists to make you question everything. Music, art, society, my will to live. My opinion is quite clear on this category, I think. This is like the, what if we did this? Type inspired genre. This is where we're going to find graphic scores that look like abstract drawings that are impossible for musicians to read, or vocal techniques that could in most studios be considered illegal, and composers doing crazy shit like feeding hay to pianos. I wish I was kidding. Or like stuffing erasers or like ping pong balls between piano strings to like achieve a very specific sound. Composers here, we're talking John Cage, Stockhausen, and the name to make all musicians run in fear, Schoenberg. And the piece we're gonna listen to today calls for a very strange vocal technique called Sprechstimme, which is a deeply cursed offspring of speaking and singing and whispering. You'll see. This is Pierre Lunaire by Schoenberg.
Mit Augen trinkt, des Nachts der Mond in Wogen nie.
Okay, let's take a break. Back to opera here. I told you, there's an agenda. Baroque opera. Now, for music and art in general, Baroque refers to anything between 1600 and 1750, and this is the oldest category of opera that we still perform today. Baroque opera uses much smaller orchestras, so we're talking like period instruments of harpsichords, recorders, and then just like the early music equivalents of the instruments that we see today. So the sound is a lot leaner, it's a lot more transparent, and vocally, you're gonna hear way less vibrato than you hear in modern opera styles. We got composers like Monteverdi, of course, Handel, of course, and Purcell or Purcell, depending on, where you're from. And the piece I'm going to show you is an excerpt from the oldest opera in the repertory that we still perform today, L'Orfeo by Monteverdi. It premiered in 1607. Okay, guys, it is over 400 years old, and you'll hear some interesting techniques. This is specific to Baroque music. Cantatas. Cantatas are one of those genres where the definition totally depends on where you are in history, because there are cantatas from a long time ago, and then there are cantatas that are a lot more modern. In the Baroque era, so remember 1600 to 1750, cantatas were usually long songs. Usually they were written for church, sometimes they were for secular settings, but usually for church. And we're just talking like a solo singer, maybe two, and then a small group of instruments. So sort of more of a chamber type thing. But then over time, it started to bloat and it started to expand, as we do. And, by the time we get to the classical and romantic periods, we're talking about oratorios basically inside cantatas. We'll get there, don't worry about it. But if you're trying to figure out what it's going to sound like before you go, look at the year that the cantata was written, and that'll tell you everything you need to know. Obviously, we cannot talk about cantatas without talking about the GOAT. All hail King Cantata. We've got Bach, of course. So here's a snippet of the Netherlands Bach Society singing Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme. Chamber choir and small ensemble. I love this genre so much. I'm going to try and be normal about it. If you're looking for classical vocal music that has little to no vibrato, welcome. You are home. We're talking 8 to 12 singers. Sometimes we'll get up to 16 or 20, but really where the magic comes in is that you've only got 1 or 2 singers per part. Just like how in sports, everyone's an athlete, but sometimes they'll choose to play as a team. Everyone's a soloist in their own right, but they just choose to sing together. This music is all about super tight harmonies and blend. So you're going to hear it in, most of the time, very reverberant spaces. So we're talking churches or amphitheaters or cathedrals or stairwells or something. The tone is very pure, very focused, very clean, which is why people either fall in love with this particular style or they're wrong. And case in point, here's Voces 8 singing May It Be from Lord of the Rings. Chanting. Arguably, this is going to be the oldest music on this list. It's so old that modern musical notation didn't exist yet. Monks were instead using neumes, squiggly sort of style of writing that says the music kind of goes up here and a little bit down here. Chant, or specifically Gregorian chant, is defined by a couple of core features here. So we've got unison singing, where there's no harmony, mostly male voices, Latin text. It's a deeply churchy sound world, and it is a Roman Catholic tradition, so I guess that makes sense. It's designed for these enormous stone cathedrals with reverb, oh my god, for days. Musically, chant's going to revolve around a reciting tone, which is why you get this repeated note that everyone thinks of, where you've got the like a very holy doorbell. Here's chant in its natural habitat. This is the Dominican friars chanting Salve Regina during a service in September 2025. Contemporary song is exactly what it sounds like. It's recital music that was written recently. Contemporary, of course, means that the composer is still living, but also usually there's like this implication that it's within the last 20 years or so. Stylistically, it's going to be all over the place, just like, one pop singer sounds different from another today. Especially in contemporary art song, composers tend to favor a little bit less formality. They like for different sounds to be explored. They like it to sound a little bit more, dare I say, human, perhaps? And another huge plus about contemporary songs is that they exist in tons of languages that opera doesn't traditionally cover.
Between the mountains and valleys and the slow hushed depths of the rivers and the mysterious touch
English art song. This time we're talking specifically about British composers. Most English art song is, hold your hats, in English. And it tends to put, what is this? Got this hair that like refuses to stay out of my face. Help me here. I would say that English song in general tends to put this big emphasis on clarity of text and purity of tone. There's a big, strong Anglican choral influence here. We're going to get there in just a second. So the ideal sound is going to be pure and clean and natural. You're going to have composers like Ivor Gurney, Roger Quilter, Charles Villiers Stanford. I know he's technically Irish, whatever. And of course, Benjamin Britten. So for this example, we're going to go straight to the source. We've got Peter Pears, who is one of the most respected English art song tenors of all time, singing Britten's arrangement of O Wally Wally, accompanied by Britten.
Love's a jewel while it is new, but when it is old, it groweth cold and fades away like morning dew.
Okay, now we have what we just mentioned, that English cathedral Anglican choral tradition. Traditionally, cathedral choirs are antiphonal, which means that they're sitting on either side of the church and singing at each other instead of all standing in one thing singing at you. And again, historically, they were made up of boys and men, and that tends to be how it is now. So this is where that really famous pure boy soprano tone comes from. The sound is very full, but it's also very clean. There's not going to be any vibrato, or if there is, it's going to be very minimal. And the popularity of this tradition has inspired composers all over the world, so you might know some contemporary names like maybe Eric Whitacre or Ole Yalo or maybe Jonathan Dove. And then historically, of course, we've got the big ones. We've got Vaughan Williams, we've got Elgar, we've got John Tavener, and my personal favorite, Herbert Howells. Here is King's College, Cambridge, singing A Spotless Rose. Okay, this one's a bit of a departure, but it absolutely belongs on this list, so stick with me here. A big amount of the modern soundtrack singing that we see today is formed with classical technique, especially when it comes to choirs. We're thinking Lord of the Rings or John Williams scores or The Fifth Element or Game of Thrones. That big, dramatic, choral sound, very classical coded. Video games are fully on board with this too. We've got Final Fantasy, Bayonetta Origins, Child of Light. They all make heavy use of classical inspired singing, to the point that a lot of the singers who are hired for these projects are classically trained, at least in some way. They may have departed from it later on, but the foundation is still based in classical roots. Let's have a listen. You'll recognize it.
Lord, save me.
Man, look. Look there.
You scared her off!
All right, and good riddance.
Can you talk?
Yes.
Okay, folk crossover, or in the case of a lot of us, Celtic crossover. This is the category that's going to live in that space between folk music and classical technique. Irish music, I think, is the most famous example, at least in the Western world, but you're also going to find this in American gospel, that there's some crossover there, or in ancient Chinese melodies. What's going to make it sound like a classically inspired folk song is the intention behind it. So the music's going to be written down, the arrangements are going to be stylized in a classical way, the vocal tone is usually going to be pretty pure and clean. There's not going to be any growls or rasp, not a whole lot of improvisation either. In general, it's just going to sound a little bit more formal than what you would expect if you were sitting in a bar or a pub or like around a campfire or something. And that's the point. That's what makes it sound like a classical inspiration. This is Anuna performing Phil Philaroon. Halfway there. How we doing? Ready to move on? Good. French Mélodie and Chanson. We had English art song before. This is now the French version of recital music. Where English song is very clean and very restrained, French Mélodie is all about vibes. Everything's going to be a suggestion. Everything is very atmospheric. It's going to be poetic, you know, very sensual. The harmony is tonal, but it's not predictable. It does lean a bit more modal. The piano is absolutely a co-main character rather than just accompaniment. Big composers in the genre, we've got Fauré, we've got Debussy, Ravel, Satie, Lili Boulanger. But my personal favorite mélodie, my personal favorite chanson is L'heure exquise by Rinaldo Hahn, sung here exquisitely by Susan Graham. Okay, we had French art song. Now we're going to have German art song, also known as Lieder, where French Mélodie is subtle and atmospheric. German Lieder is intense. It's very deeply rooted in the poetry, and it's very emotionally direct. The text is über alles. It is the most important thing. Germans love their poets, and the music exists to serve the words. The repertoire is going to be raw, it's going to be dramatic, it's going to be very hard on your sleeve. Even if the music doesn't sound like it, the emotion behind it definitely is. German Lieder has been around for centuries, so we're going to have everything from the strophic Schubert songs to the non-strophic Schubert songs to this dense romantic counterpoint when we've got Brahms to this very subtle sort of musicality from Wolf. But if I didn't use Schubert as the example here, the internet would hunt me for sport. So here's Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, DFD, if you want to sound like you know what you're talking about, singing the iconic Erlkönig. Grand opera. It is exactly what it sounds like. Too much, on purpose. Usually going to be 5 acts, massive casts, unhinged set designs, costumes that cost more than my education. And because it's 19th century France, entire ass ballets just like dropped into the middle of an opera for no reason. Because, and if you're listening and thinking how the f they afford this, correct. They were absurdly expensive to produce. So when the French aristocracy stopped being able to bankroll these incredibly lavish productions, grand opera went up in flames. Quite literally, the Paris Opera House caught fire in the 1900s and all the old sets burned. The king of this genre is going to be Meyerbeer. Pretty much from 1820 to 1840, it was all Meyerbeer. So if you ever see Les Huguenots or Robert le Diable on a program announcement for an opera house, they're feeling very bold. They're feeling very expensive. So here's a taste from Les Huguenots. Italian art art song. This is basically opera's slightly shyer little sister. It's like everything Italian opera is, just performed in a smaller room and not for 2,000 people. There's a technique called bel canto, which is literally beautiful singing, and it's all about this pure tone and these lovely vowels that are all in the same line, and it's supposed to sound really pretty. When you apply that basic technique for opera to smaller repertoire that doesn't require the physical body of an adult to be able to project to 2,000 people, that's where you start to get things like the original Italian art songs that usually young singers will start with, because it's like the perfect place to start when you're training classically. So for a slightly different comparison here, let's listen to a master of the craft. This is Cecilia Bartoli, proving that simple beauty does not mean that it's easy. Light opera. This genre has a bunch of lanes. We're going to do our best to condense them because why pick one? Leo, kom maar. Ga je piano spelen? Ja? Ja, lekker. Oh, dat is mooi. Look, we have a contemporary art song composer right here. Wow. You might be very avant-garde. We got Singspiel, like The Magic Flute. We've got Opéra Comique, like Carmen. We've got the ballad operas, like The Beggar's Opera. Gilbert and Sullivan, pretty much anything by Gilbert and Sullivan. Operetta. If it sounds like opera, but people talk sometimes, that's going to be light opera. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, Cait, this sounds suspiciously like musical theater, you're correct. Light opera is one of the two links between opera and Broadway. Big thing you're going to notice here, no belting. Loud singing? Yes. Dramatic singing? Absolutely. But it's still going to be that classical technique all the way through. If opera scares you, this is a fantastic place to start because you already know this music. You just didn't know it was opera. I promise you know this one. This is from the Pirates of Penzance. Now you know what it is.
I am the very model of a modern major general. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England and I quote the fight historical from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical. I am very well acquainted too with matters mathematical. I understand equations both as simple and quadratical. About binomial theorem, I'm teeming with a lot of news. Lot of news. I have it. With many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse.
Okay, madrigals. This is the secular vocal music from the Renaissance, like basically Renaissance a cappella. It's the same multi-voice harmony situation we had in churches, except instead of like praise be, it's more like, oh, this man, I swear to God. They're usually unaccompanied, although sometimes there's like lutes and stuff that might be involved. Very texty, meant to be sung very socially, sort of celebratory, or maybe at a sad event or something, just, you know, like in life. And if your brain is now conjuring pictures of people in tights at a Renaissance festival, that's correct. Here we have composers like Thomas Morley, Byrd, Monteverdi. Again, this is the King Singers politely slapping Now is the Month of Maying.
Now is the month of May, when merry lads are playing. Fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la. Now is the month of May, when merry lads are playing. Fa la 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 la, fa la 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 la. Each with his bonny lads upon the greeny grass. Fa la 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 la.
Okay, I know, before anyone throws a chair at me, musical theater is not opera. I'm not here to claim that it is. However, legit musical theater is a real term. It's a controversial, but it's a real term, and everyone in the musical theater world knows what it means. This is our golden age stuff, right? We've got Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, Oklahoma, that sort of stuff. Pre-belting. It's lyric, it's floaty, it's vibrato having. This is that second style that grew out of classical technique once microphones became a thing, that sort of bridge between opera and modern musical theater. A lot of the singers that you're going to see cast in these roles were trained in classical music first. The absolute blueprint for this is, of course, Julie Andrews, and I will not hear one single word against my mother, okay? Okay, listen for yourself.
The hills are alive with the sound of music, with songs they have sung for 1,000 years. The hills fill my heart with the sound of music. My heart wants to sing every song it hears.
Okay, now we have opera buffa. That literally means funny opera in Italian. And yeah, it's exactly that. It's mostly late Baroque into classical era opera. It's built around comedy. So you've got like exaggerated characters, very fast-paced dialogue, kind of like this video that's been set to music, very simple, catchy melodies that people could walk out of the theater singing, and bless, happy endings. They also sort of birthed this amazing stock character, which is the basso buffo. It's literally such a common role in these operas that basses can specialize in doing these characters. Big names in this genre are going to include The Marriage of Figaro, The Elixir of Love, and Rossini's Cinderella. And for this one, we're going to watch one of those very famous comic basses, Enzo Dara, being iconic in Rossini's Barber of Seville, for as long as this video's format will allow me to.
Un dottor nella mia sorte non si lascia inginocchia, no, no. Un dottor della mia sorte non si lascia inginocchia.
Of course, where we have funny opera, then we also have to have serious opera. This is your opera seria. Opera seria is where all of the opera stereotypes come from. Gods, kings, betrayal, noble suffering, and yes, people taking way too long to die while singing about it. I know, it's a thing. Like opera buffa, this was dominant in the 1700s. It has its own more formal rules that make it distinct, but the main thing to know as an audience member is the emotional tone. If you think that you're going to see a light Mozart comedy and you're going to have a great night out, ha ha ha, isn't it so funny? And then you accidentally buy tickets to an opera seria, you're gonna have an emotionally aggressive evening. Sure are. Same composers show up here. We've got Mozart, Rossini, Donizetti, but for a classic example, we're actually gonna go a little bit earlier. This is Handel's Giulio Cesare, sung by Danielle Denise, who is so perfectly cast as Cleopatra that it almost feels unfair. Okay, moving on. Remember, like ages ago, way back at the beginning of this video, we talked about oratorio when we were talking about cantatas? Cool, here we are. Oratorio is basically an opera, just no staging. You're gonna have a plot, you're gonna have characters, soloists, a chorus. You might even have fully sung dialogue, just like we have in operas, but there aren't gonna be any sets or costumes or lighting or acting, really. It's just gonna be the music. And because of that, oratorios are usually performed in churches or concert halls rather than opera houses. People tend to associate them with religion, and fair enough, a lot of them are very religious, but there are some secular oratorios too. If you're the kind of person who closes your eyes at the opera anyways and just doesn't pay attention to anything happening on the stage, you're just here for the music, oratorios are for you, babe. You're gonna recognize a lot of these. We've got Handel's Messiah, Hallelujah, the Bach Christmas Oratorio, Mendelssohn's Elijah, Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex. But for sheer sonic drama, and just because it's so f***ing cool, you gotta do Verdi's Requiem. Buckle up. Next, we have Popera. Popera, the vocal version of classical crossover, is very simple to define. It is either one, opera sung in a non-operatic way, or two, non-opera music sung in an operatic way. That's it. It's not about popularity or who's the best singer or who could have had a legitimate career. Like, no, none of that. I love this genre. I feel like this genre gets a lot of flack, but it's a huge reason that people discover opera in the first place. I feel like everyone knows who Andrea Bocelli is. I discovered opera through Charlotte Church when I was 11 years old. Katherine Jenkins was a huge influence for a lot of people. And of course, for an entire generation, the face of classical vocal music was Josh Groban. Here's Josh Groban and Celine Dion singing an absolute opera classic and the thing that really turned me on to opera when I was a wee child, The Prayer.
From above.
made it. We're here. The final one. Verismo Opera. Verismo means realism. So these are the operas that are about real people with real problems. We're not talking about kings and queens and nobles. No, we're talking about poverty and relationships and illness and jealousy and heartbreak. You know, like normal stuff. From that list, you've probably noticed that the majority of them are probably going to be pretty sad, pretty tragic. And that's true. Bring tissues. Generally, they're going to be late romantic operas. So we've got these very sweeping melodies, these huge orchestras and emotions, and these very long legato lines and high notes and these harmonies that just like you in the chest. There are a few other composers who are known for Verismo opera, but like unless you're planning to get a master's degree in opera, don't worry, I did that for you. The name's going to be Puccini. So to finish off our rapid fire list with the best thing that has ever crossed this planet, here is La Bohème. Okay, so what's the verdict? Do you still hate classical singing, or did you just hate opera? And maybe now you don't. Either way, congratulations on completing your initiation into the Baroque agenda. Membership is free. Side effects include crying in Italian and buying opera tickets with your rent money. Okay, I'll see you next time.